Right now, somewhere between this sentence and the moment you fall asleep tonight, your brain is going to pass through a door. You won't notice when it happens. You won't remember being on either side of it, but for roughly 7 minutes every single night, you stop being entirely awake. You stop being entirely asleep. You become something else. Most people assume sleep is simple. The lights dim. You close your eyes. You drift off. But that's not quite right. What's actually happening inside your head during those 7 minutes is one of the strangest things your nervous system does all day. Hypnagogia. The word was coined in 1848 by a French scholar named Alfred Maury, who became obsessed with the visions he kept seeing in the moments before sleep. Faces, geometric shapes, voices speaking in languages he didn't know. He started keeping a notebook by his bed. He would lie down, wait, and write down everything he saw before sleep took him. By the time he finished, he had hundreds of entries. None of them looked like ordinary dreams. They were too vivid, too fragmented, too alive. For more than a century after Maury, scientists mostly ignored hypnagogia. It wasn't sleep, it wasn't waking. It didn't fit cleanly into any category, so it was treated like static between stations. In the last 40 years, that has completely changed, because researchers have started realizing those 7 minutes are not a gap. They are their own distinct state of consciousness. In 1987, a Greek psychologist named Andreas Mavromatis published a book that took him 10 years to write. He called hypnagogia the third state of consciousness, a place that wasn't waking and wasn't sleeping, but had its own internal rules, its own logic, its own kind of reality. He pulled together every reference he could find. Aristotle had described it. Aquinas had written about it. Edgar Allan Poe used it as material for his stories. Mavromatis argued the ancient world took hypnagogia far more seriously than the modern one ever has. We just stopped paying attention to it. And in losing the language for it, we lost the ability to notice it was happening to us. Here's what's actually happening. When you lie down and close your eyes, your brain begins to shift its dominant frequency. The alpha waves that pulse through your cortex during quiet wakefulness, around 8 to 13 cycles per second, slow down. They're replaced by theta waves, around 4 to 8 cycles per second. But the change isn't instant, and it isn't uniform. Different parts of your brain power down at different times. Your visual cortex might be flickering with random activity, while your motor cortex has already gone limp. Your memory system might still be running while your sense of self has already dissolved. For 7 minutes, you are not a single conscious being. You are a chorus of brain regions falling asleep one at a time, out of sync, talking to each other in fragments. This is why hypnagogic experiences feel so strange. You're not dreaming. You're not awake. You're listening to your own brain disassemble. The most famous symptom is the falling sensation. You're drifting, almost gone, and then your whole body lurches as if you'd missed a step. Your leg kicks, your heart races, you're awake again. This is called the hypnic jerk, and it happens to roughly 70% of people. Scientists still don't fully agree on why. One theory comes from evolutionary biology. Our primate ancestors slept in trees. As muscles relaxed at the edge of sleep, the brain may have evolved a check, a final test to make sure the muscles were still attached, the grip was still firm, the sleeper wasn't about to fall. 6 million years later, you sleep in a bed. But your brain hasn't been told. Every time you slip towards sleep, somewhere inside you, a primate brain is still checking that you haven't let go of the branch. But the hypnic jerk is just the surface. What happens deeper inside hypnagogia is far stranger. In 2002, a Japanese psychologist named Yoshihiko Koga ran a study on what people see in those final minutes before sleep. The results were so consistent across subjects that they couldn't be coincidence. Faces, geometric patterns, repeating textures. The same handful of imagery showed up again and again across cultures, across ages. The face phenomenon is especially common. Random faces of strangers appear in the dark behind your closed eyes, fully formed, sometimes staring back at you. Most people forget them within seconds of fully waking, but if you train yourself to notice, you can catch them. They're there every night. Then there's the Tetris effect. In 2000, a Harvard sleep researcher named Robert Stickgold ran an experiment where he had people play Tetris for several hours, then tracked what happened in those first 7 minutes after they lay down to sleep. Almost every subject reported seeing falling Tetris blocks behind their closed eyes. The pattern was so reliable that Stickgold could predict almost to the second when the imagery would arrive in a subject's mind. And here's where it gets stranger. Even people with severe amnesia who couldn't remember playing Tetris that day still saw the blocks. Their conscious memory was gone. Their hypnagogic mind remembered anyway. Stickgold realized he'd stumbled onto something important. Hypnagogia isn't a malfunction. It's where the brain replays the day, scrubs through it, and starts the long process of deciding what to keep. Every night in those 7 minutes, your brain is sorting through everything you saw, heard, and felt. Most of it gets thrown away. A small percentage gets quietly filed into long-term storage. The imagery you see, the falling blocks, the faces, the half-words, spoken in voices that aren't yours, those are the residue. You're watching your own memory take itself apart and rebuild. But that's only half of it, because hypnagogia isn't just about memory. It might also be where some of your best ideas come from. Thomas Edison knew this. He claimed to use hypnagogia as a thinking tool. He'd sit in a chair holding a steel ball in each hand. Beneath each hand, he placed a metal pan. He'd close his eyes and let himself drift toward sleep. The moment he started to slip deeper, his fingers would relax. The steel balls would drop into the pans, and the noise would jolt him awake. He claimed the ideas that came to him in those seconds were sharper and stranger than anything he could come up with at his desk. Salvador Dalí used a nearly identical method with a key and a metal plate. He called it slumber with a key. He credited dozens of paintings to the visions he caught in those moments before the key fell. For most of the 20th century, this was treated as artist superstition. Then in 2021, a team of scientists at the Paris Brain Institute, led by Delphine Oudiette, decided to test it directly. They gave people a difficult math puzzle that had a hidden shortcut buried in the rules. Most people didn't find the shortcut. The team then let some subjects nap for just long enough to enter hypnagogia, then woke them before deeper sleep set in. The hypnagogia group solved the puzzle at almost 3 times the rate of the people who stayed awake. 3 times, from 60 seconds of being neither asleep nor awake. The researchers wrote that there appears to be a brief creative window inside hypnagogia that may be the most fertile state of consciousness for solving problems the waking mind can't crack. Edison was right, Dalí was right, and every single night you walk through that exact same window, you just don't know to look around. And here's where it gets worse. Because hypnagogia is also the door where the strangest experiences in human consciousness happen. Sleep paralysis. The sensation of being pinned to the bed, awake but unable to move. The figures in the corner of the room. The pressure on the chest. The footsteps. Across cultures, across centuries, the same descriptions appear. The old hag in Newfoundland, the Kanashibari in Japan, the jinn that sit on sleepers' chests in Arabia. Different myths, same neurology. Sleep paralysis happens when the body's muscle paralysis system, which normally activates during deep sleep, accidentally switches on while a piece of your conscious mind is still online. You are awake inside a body that has already gone to sleep, and the part of your brain that processes threat, the amygdala, is doing what it always does when something feels wrong, looking for the cause, filling in the room with whatever shape it can find. For thousands of years, people who experienced this believed they had been visited by something. We now know they were experiencing a glitch in the boundary between hypnagogia and full sleep. But from the inside, the experience is indistinguishable from being haunted. Some neuroscientists think this is where every single ghost story in human history actually came from. Not from the dead. From the 7 minutes between awake and asleep, repeated billions of times over hundreds of thousands of years. And there's one more thing about hypnagogia. almost nobody talks about. It's the one place every night where your sense of self briefly disappears. The part of you that calls itself I goes offline before the rest of your brain does. For a few minutes, there is still activity. There are still images. There are still half thoughts forming and dissolving. But there is no narrator anymore. No one inside your head packaging the experience into a story. There is just experience with no one having it, and then the rest of your brain catches up and you fall asleep, and the next morning the narrator wakes up and assumes it was running the whole time, but it wasn't. Every night you become something the waking version of you would not recognize, a self that flickers without a center, a consciousness without a you inside it, and then you come back, and you forget, and you call it sleep. There is no test that can detect when you've crossed into it. There's no clock that can measure it from the inside. The boundary that separates being awake from being something else has no edge you can feel, no door you can hear close behind you. By the time it would matter to know, the part of you that could know is already gone. For roughly 25 years of your life, if you live to 80, you'll be unconscious. But far more often than people realize, you'll be in this in-between place, the faces in the dark, the voices speaking nonsense, the Tetris blocks falling behind your eyelids, the hypnic jerk that catches you on the way down. Every night, for as long as you live, you don't remember any of it. You can't. The part of you that remembers is exactly the part that goes quiet first. Hypnagogia is the only state of consciousness most humans will never witness, even though they enter it on a strict schedule every single night for their entire lives. Tonight, when you lie down and close your eyes, somewhere in the next 7 minutes, you'll go through that door again. The faces will be there, the blocks will fall, a primate brain you've never met will check the branch, and you'll go through it the way you always have. Alone, eyes closed, halfway gone, becoming for a moment something that has no name in any language you speak, and then you'll forget all of it. You always do.